So glad you're here, and thanks for joining us on this evening. Looking forward to talking about Chinese medicine and digestion and healthy digestive function during the holidays, because I just like talking about food. And I definitely want to just dive right into it because I want to make sure that we have time to answer everybody's questions who already posted them. And if anything comes up through the course of the talk, definitely want to get to that. One of the things that I wanted to start with was something that some of you may be familiar with, which is in Chinese medicine, there is this concept of the 5 elements. And this is true with traditional medicines around the world. But in traditional Chinese medicine, we talk about wood, fire, earth, metal, and water. And what these elements do is they are a model for us to recognize how we are microcosms of nature and the universe around us. And this is really important to Chinese medicine because we can learn a lot about ourselves simply by observing the way nature works around us. And if we have time at the end, I'd be so happy to get into all of the elements, but the one that we're going to be talking about tonight is the earth element. And the earth element is the element of digestion. And while all of the different elements have characteristics that are pretty predictable in our associations with them, like metal is really rigid and wood bends and so on, earth is the element of digestion. This is where transformation takes place. It's kind of like if you throw a peach on the ground, over time, the earth is what kind of breaks that down and turns it into something useful and fertilizes it, and eventually it turns into a tree. So the element of transformation, of change, of potential is the earth, and that is our digestion. I eat a sandwich and I transform that into Noah. When that process is working well and all of the elements are lining up, separate the good stuff from the bad stuff, I feel great. Get rid of the bad stuff, keep the good. If it's weak, if it gets bogged down, if there's any kind of problem with it, if I'm overworking it by putting bad stuff in me, that's when I don't feel so good, and that's when I start to have digestive problems. So it's the process of taking the crude, undifferentiated stuff, the sprig of broccoli or the sandwich, and turning it into something that makes sense, something my body can use. And basically, this is yin and yang, right? Separating something that is undifferentiated and separating the good stuff from the bad stuff. And this is what it's all about. With quarantine, with the elections, with what's been a pretty tough year for a lot of us, this has been a challenge to our digestive systems, and the holidays are going to be a little bit more of a gastronomic feat this year than usual, probably. It's traditionally, this is one of my favorite times of year because this is when we're getting together. This is when we're breaking bread. This is when we're reconnecting with friends and family and getting and giving food. And food is one of those things that we all are really dialed into and have a lot of identification of good stuff and sometimes not so good stuff with. So it's wrapped up in the holidays, wrapped up in the year that's behind us, wrapped up in the year that's coming, and also some of the limitations that we're going to face over the next few months with quarantining and social distancing. This seemed like a particularly poignant topic for the night: how to get through the holidays, how to feel your best, and really how to prime ourselves for 2021, because it's going to be a better year in all kinds of ways. So with that, I'd really love to just kind of dive into any questions that people have had so far, and then pick up with anybody who's online with us now.
Great. Yeah. As a reminder, just pop any questions in the chat and I can definitely read those out. But like I said, we did have a few that were submitted beforehand. So I'll just start off with one of the questions that we had was, based on this time of year, what are some great herbs and foods that I should be eating?
That's a really good question. The operative word there, or phrase there, being based on this time of year. eating with the seasons is definitely something that we want to do and we focus on in our medicine, and again, in all kinds of traditional medicines, because we want to observe the rhythms of the year. We look for nourishing foods this time of year that are, we usually gravitate towards soups and stews and roasts and things that take a long time to cook. Definitely not diving into the raw stuff this time of year. But we want to eat nourishing foods that are going to help kind of like pad us up a little bit for the winter, but not overly cloying stuff. And that's one of the challenges of the holidays, right? Where we're indulging in all kinds of stuff. So making conscious choices for those kinds of long, slow cooked foods is probably the best move for us.
I love a good long cooked meal and food.
It's the stuff, that makes the house smell good that you've been cooking all day.
Right.
It's one of the great things about Thanksgiving.
Yes. I feel like my apartment building, everyone's making those kinds of foods all day. The slow cooker foods that smell good just already in the morning.
Totally.
The best. So someone wondered, they said, I need help incorporating healthier choices and would love advice on how to make them appealing to family members. Do you have any go-to secretly healthy recipes that you can share with us?
Yeah, for sure. So this isn't necessarily the season of the healthiest choices, but you can do it. I'm the first one to dive into cakes and gravies and things like that. But when I eat well and I'm making good choices, again, getting back to what I was saying before about and making it easy for my body, that's when I feel the best. One way to guide eating and food choices during the season is by colors. And this is kind of true throughout the year, but making the foods that we eat not just brown, not just the gravies and the meats and the potatoes and stuff, but making sure that we're getting enough vegetables, some fruits, not necessarily a ton of them, but the beets, the carrots, the incredible range of squashes, Brussels sprouts. These are all things that if you don't know how to use them, there are some great cookbooks out there that can make amazing, amazing meals. Last year, our daughter had a friend come over who was a vegan chef at a pretty major restaurant. And the last thing she wanted to do was cook for the holidays. But we wound up finding some cookbooks. One of them was the Bish Bash Bosh cookbook, and I'm forgetting exactly who the authors were, but it's a fantastic book. And just the most amazing meals came from vegetables that I had never even thought of. And so I'm trying to think, what did we cook? We had a wild rice stuffed pumpkin. We made this incredible nut loaf that satisfied the meat cravings for sure. A vegan gravy. There was, we made a sort of a Nutella tree. So we definitely
I remember seeing pictures of the Nutella tree that
looked. The Nutella tree was definitely like a hit. There were these fake sausages that they were like a vegan sausage, but with maple seasoned eggplant strips around them. I don't know where the term pigs in blankets comes from, how old it is, and this was about as far as you could get from it, but it hit that note. And the whole thing was just amazing. So it wasn't only vegetarian, it was a vegan meal. And so I would say in the lead up to the holidays, definitely check the notes on this talk that you'll get. We'll email everybody some follow-up information, and I'll find the authors for the Bish Bash Bosh cookbook. But
I have it.
Oh,
conveniently right
there you go.
It's Henry Firth and Ian Thesby, or Thesby maybe, but all of their stuff is really great.
Yeah, so that can be something you do for yourself. That can be your mission. As sacrilegious as it seems, it's with Thanksgiving coming up, and is make the move to a more plant-based holiday season. Yeah, for sure.
That all sounds really yummy. We'll try and find some specific recipes. We'll try and send
Yeah,
those
I'll flip here and, and
after
tap my
this.
faves.
Um, are there foods and herbs that can help with heartburn?
Yeah, there are. So heartburn's an interesting thing because people have heartburn for a range of different reasons. They have heartburn because there's too much acid in their stomach, or there's bizarrely not enough acid. They can have mechanical problems with the sphincter, with the sort of the valve between at the top of their stomach. And what heartburn is the acids, it's acid regurgitation, that pain of the digestive fluids in our stomach kind of rising up into areas that aren't as protected as our stomach, and it burns. There are things that we can use. There are definitely things like bromelain and papaya enzyme and other enzymes. There are some herbs cooking with ginger. We haven't mentioned ginger yet, and that's probably something that we will come back to a couple of times over the talk. Ginger is just amazing for digestion, and even though it's kind of hot and spicy, it's really, really good for settling the stomach. We use it in everything from nausea to sensitive digestive systems to kind of overactive digestive systems. It's great for all kinds of things, including heartburn and helping to settle that. Somewhat cooling herbs like chamomile. Chamomile tea can also help with heartburn. The thing about heartburn, though, is there are definitely things that we can do to treat it. We have tons of Chinese herbs that will help to settle that burning, that heat that's coming up. But really, the issue isn't so much what we do to treat it, it's more how to avoid it. And that's the challenge for most people. The triggers for heartburn run the gamut from eating too much food to eating too fast, spicy foods, greasy foods, bad posture, kind of holding your body in a way that allows it to flow smoothly, allows the rhythms of your digestion to take place, and to not kind of collapse on yourself. Posture plays into it, as does position. For a lot of people, eating a lot of food and then going and reclining on the couch, being vertical, kind of defeats gravity's role. And for some people with acid reflux or heartburn, that change in position can make all the difference. And then there are also not so much herbs that we give, but there are definitely medications that people take. Classic one being aspirin, that are irritants to the stomach and can lead to cascade of other problems that can result in heartburn. So yes, there are things that we can do. Ginger, chamomile tea, those are really simple. Really the trick with heartburn is to know those things that you do that flare it up, and just avoid them. And that's tricky during the holidays for sure, but anybody who has it or thinks that they have it can kind of tease out whether it's because they just ate a staggering amount of turkey and potatoes, or if it's something else.
So someone just sent in a question. So sometimes we have some digestive issues after stress or stressful situations. Are there herbs that can help with this?
Stress. Yeah. So we see this in Chinese medicine, but we see this in conventional medicine, and everybody knows this from some kind of experience that we've had. Stress affects your digestion. It messes with it. It makes it hard. Sometimes, for some people, it completely shuts their appetite down. Some people are voracious. And this speaks to the integration that we see in this medicine of the mind and the body and the spirit. These things are happening simultaneously. And so emotional states definitely affect our digestion. Digestion also takes work. And so if you're stressed or if you're overworked or tired, the possibility of having digestive problems, whether it's appetite, nausea, reflux, elimination issues, all of these can can result or at least get worse with stress. And this gets back to what we were talking about with heartburn. A lot of the time there are foods, they're pretty predictable, the things that will make things worse. Hot foods, super spicy foods, excessive amounts of coffee, lots of alcohol, processed foods, the really sugary foods, the things that send us on some kind of a roller coaster. Those are things that we sometimes look for in a weird way to self-medicate when we're stressed. But if we have sensitive digestive systems, we wind up paying the price for that. So as much as what you eat, which is definitely important, like we were saying we were kind of getting at with the heartburn, it's how you eat and making sure that you're not overindulging in stuff that's gonna just set you off on a jag of binging and then feeling crummy and so on. A lot of people are emotional eaters, and between being quarantined, which has definitely pushed a lot of our buttons, and whether we're doing it on Zoom or in person, the holidays are really challenging for some people. So it's all the more reason to kind of identify that conscious eating and how we feel about our food and the connections that we're making with it and how much we're eating, that stuff's as important as what we're eating. Our digestive systems, like so many things in our bodies, just do so much better with predictable rhythms.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I'm really glad that someone asked that because I know, as to your point, the holiday season is stressful, but I mean, it's just so heightened this year because it just hasn't stopped being stressful for so long. So thank you for asking that, and that was a really helpful answer.
And I just want to, before we go into another question, I just want to also throw in there that stress isn't like this thing that you catch. Stress is something, stress is one of those things that affects everything in your life, but can be but warrants its own management. So especially if stress plays into digestion issues for you, and even if it doesn't, managing stress this time of year, at the end of this year, during this year, it's all the stuff that we already know. Keep moving, exercise. Movement helps with not only all of the healthy hormones and stuff that stress can kind of jam up, but in terms of your digestive system, movement, exercise, aerobic stuff, even just like walking, helps with facilitating the movement, what we call peristalsis, the sort of way your body massages itself internally to digest better. And make sure you're getting enough sleep, that you're taking time to rest, meditate if you don't have a practice, learn how. All of these things can make up the constellation of things that affect your digestion.
Thank you, that's helpful. Before you had mentioned ginger in relation to upset tummies, and someone was wondering if you could offer some insight towards natural ways to aid healthy digestion after a large meal and potentially an upset stomach.
Yeah, so we have all kinds of herbs in Chinese medicine that can help people recover from digestive challenges after a meal. There's one formula that's really, really commonly used. It's commonly known as curing pills. And now it's marketed here for a couple of reasons as cooling, C-U-L-I-N-G. Sorry, I have a dog here who's kind of rattling the cage. No, he's not in a cage. So curing pills, this is based on a classical prescription that we use for indigestion and overindulgence, and it works really, really well. It works if you've overeaten. It's good to take when you anticipate going to a meal where you're going to just really dive in. That said, at Nova Center, we like to find out what's going on with our patients and figure out what is making their digestive challenges particularly unique to them, because that's the way we make the most meaningful change and help them with those things. That said, The herbs and the spices that I usually recommend people cook with are the things that we gravitate towards naturally around this time of year. We talked about ginger, and that's a nice warming herb to cook with. It's great to make tea with, but also things like nutmeg and cardamom and cinnamon, cloves. These are the herbs and the spices of the season, and cooking with those are a good way, making sure that those are kind of vibrant and mixed up in your food. Is a really good way to kind of offset some of the challenges from the other stuff that we're eating.
Someone else was wondering more specifically, so they said, I have IBS and would love some help on navigating meals more generally, but also the more decadent kind of holiday meals as well. And they wondered what your advice would be for that.
You know, IBS is an interesting diagnosis. It's I think the most common gastrointestinal diagnosis in the country. And like we keep saying, like we were discussing around heartburn, there are a lot of different reasons that people have IBS. IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, is something that we can understand in simple terms as basically your gut goes into spasms when you put the wrong things in there. And that is something that can be just a little uncomfortable and bind people up. That can be really, really brutal and super painful and lead to all kinds of problems. And we definitely want to, if it is something that you think is a problem for you and has been an ongoing issue and doesn't really go away, first thing we want to do is definitely make sure that we're not confusing it with something more serious like Crohn's disease, where people have severe reactions to things that can be actually really, really dangerous. Sorry about that. Puppies. So the first thing we want to do is figure out when we say IBS, especially because it is so common, we want to make sure that we're differentiating it and making sure that you're taking care of yourself nutritionally and with supplements, and certainly from a conventional medical point of view, getting attention and diagnostics that will confirm that it is in fact IBS and not something more important. But like the heartburn that we were discussing before, while there are some definite culprits, the hot, spicy stuff, excessive amounts of coffee and alcohol and greasy foods, some people, one of the things that comes up with IBS a lot of the time is people have sensitivities to what are considered the white foods, which are flour-based things like wheats and breads and pastas, and that includes cake. So some people have a sensitivity there, and that's usually because of the gluten. Some people, it's a dairy sensitivity. And again, that's interestingly, that's a protein issue. There's something that's in, especially cow dairy, that is problematic for some people to digest. They find that they are much better with either sheep or goat milk products when it comes to cheeses and creams and stuff. And then sugar. Sugar is hugely problematic for some people. So avoiding those things and recognizing when you're having flare-ups of IBS, that can make a huge difference if you can identify when eating one of those or all of them is triggering. Really easiest way to make sense of that is just absolutely eliminate them for a week, 2 weeks ideally, and then eat one of them and see what happens. It's really a pretty solid way to recognize sensitivities, because you'll feel pretty crummy once you give your body a break and then reincorporate that. In terms of taking care of yourself, this is something that we can deal with the foods themselves. But again, it gets back in part to what we could loosely call food and dining hygiene. So that's, again, not eating too much, eating regularly, giving your body a predictable schedule, avoiding stress. We feel stress in our gut. And so that's a huge problem for a lot of people with IBS. And especially because it's the gut, a probiotic, making sure that your body's natural biome there, which many of you have probably heard something about, is well supported, that the good bacteria that breaks down your food isn't being crowded out by bad bacteria. And finding a good probiotic can make all the difference around that. And then there are other things like peppermint tea, really helpful and soothing. Making sure you're eating enough vegetables, not having an all meat diet for the holidays, all meat and cake anyway. That's also helpful. Keep that fiber going through.
A meat and cake diet sounds great.
Sounds great. Yeah.
I'd also love to just acknowledge how much composure you have whilst it sounds like your dogs are.
This is, well, if I turned my computer, you would see one dog's pillows getting consumed basically by the other one. We've got a 17-year-old dog and we've got a 9-month-old dog.
Probably not good for digestion to consume a pillow. We'll add that in the recap notes.
Yes, please do not eat zippers.
For sure. So speaking of energetic beings, one of the questions that we had was, how can I stay energized during the holiday season? In particular, maybe if they can incorporate foods and spices and herbs and things like that. But what would your advice be?
Stay energized. It is, from the point of view of this discussion, it is as simple as you are what you eat. And I don't mean to be dismissive or curt, but if we really consider the things that we're talking about here, which have to do with consciousness and conscious eating, and recognizing what works for us and really just paying attention to that stuff, that's the name of the game. I really believe that we know more as individuals, not as practitioners, but as people who live in these bodies. We know what works and what doesn't work for us. And we often wind up doing things that we know aren't in our best interests. And sometimes indulgence is exactly what the doctor ordered. We at the center, at the Nova Center, we take the position that 80% is perfection. So indulging in mulled wine, like that's a really good warming drink. A little alcohol, a little cinnamon, some spices in there, very in line with everything that we're saying here. But we don't want that to be all the time. And if we did do that all the time, if we ate cheesy, processed, heavy foods all the time, we'll notice it. And we'll also notice that when we eat with a bit more of a regular rhythm, when we do things for our bodies that are predictable, when we reduce stress and the other things. And the other things that support healthy I almost got away with that. Healthy digestion. Our bodies respond. Our bodies are really, really smart that way. And our bodies are smarter than we are. There's nothing I'm going to say that is going to, or think that's going to outwit your body's own inner intelligence. So how to have more energy during the holiday season: reduce stress, eat regularly, take days off. Like, just say to yourself that these next 2 days, I'm gonna chill with the candies and the cakes and the dairy and the heavy foods and everything. Give your body a break and let it recoup. Make sure you're getting enough sleep. That's a huge thing. And especially with the quarantine, that's one of those things that has really, for some people, it's gotten much better. But for a lot of people, the rhythm of going outside, going to work, going to the gym, and coming home and being more still, the yin and yang, that's what it comes down to. The yin and the yang of life has kind of gotten blurred. And instead of the black side with the white spot and the white side with the black spot, we have a lot more gray in our lives right now. And so teasing that stuff out is something that's really important. We feel it psychically, emotionally, and our bodies feel it as well. So schedules, rhythms, not being ridiculously regimented, because that doesn't work either. But giving yourself some kind of way of giving your body a chance to recognize what's coming, that's a huge, huge bit of it. And if you're going to, or having family come over, or on Zoom, or even in person, just don't lose what you are working on too much.
That all sounds like really good advice. I feel like anecdotally, even I've been walking my dog for longer in the mornings, and even that, because I'm not walking to and from work anymore, I'm working from home. And so even that
Right.
has been helpful just in like the back and forth and the routine. And at least there's that. So we have another question, which is which herbs can help us to prepare for winter and to prevent seasonal colds and flu?
Um, you know, there in terms of seasonal stuff and the cold and flu and everything, one, dietarily, the stuff that we already talked about. So the warming herbs that are going to just help aromatically kind of get rid of the stuff in your body and keep things moving along. The cardamom, cinnamons, gingers, cloves, nutmegs, things like that, star anise, warming, not overly spicy, right? Because we don't want to just haphazardly walk into really hot, spicy foods. They can be used medicinally and therapeutically to cause sweats that help us push stuff out. Garlic, good example. Um, but generally, cooking with those things, that's how we would do that. Herbally, from a traditional Chinese medical point of view, we've got lots of herbs that we use to help treat early stages of colds and flu, which keeps it from the brush fires from getting bad. Preventatively, there are also herbs that we take. Probably the most accessible, off the shelf and well-known formula is something called Yuping Feng Song, which translates as jade windscreen. And this is something that some people start taking late summer, early autumn, and continue through the winter. But it's never too late to kind of get with it. And jade windscreen, the way we think about it is wind in this medicine we talk about as the carrier of the 100 diseases. That's the line. Wind is like the draft under your door that brings other stuff in. Just that little draft isn't enough to do anything itself, but what it brings in, that can be really damaging. And so we create this windscreen, this sort of barrier between us and the wind, not entirely unlike mom telling you to cover your neck when you go outside and it's windy. It's that same idea. And the name suggests that that screen is made out of jade, which is a precious stone. And so it's incredibly effective. And that's something that's super safe to take. I don't think in over 20 years of practice, anybody's ever had a problem tolerating it, or certainly any kind of side effects. And you can take that every day through the winter, just as part of a preventative program. And if you do get sick, if there's something that's like really virulent out there, and it doesn't even have to be COVID, but obviously we're all conscious of that right now, then talk to an herbalist, because just taking more of the jade windscreen is not the answer. We then need to kind of take a look at what's going on and change the herbs up.
So I think we're almost done with all of our questions. We had one more, but if anyone had any other questions, definitely send them through, or also we'll reach out to you via email, so you can always reach back out, and we're happy to provide more information. But before we leave, we were wondering if you could share what foods would be good to avoid during the holidays.
Well, as we were saying, those white foods, right? The stuff that falls into that category of wheats and dairy and sugar. Other foods to avoid are cold foods. And in Chinese medicine, when we talk about cold foods, we're talking about two things. We're talking about thermally cold foods, namely, don't eat a lot of ice cream and the salads and the smoothies. These are all thermally things that just are cold. But we also talk about energetic cold. Raw foods are like salads and stuff. These are things that can sort of depress the fire that makes your digestion up. You got to think that your digestion is like, your stomach is like a pot of rice, is one of the ways it's described in classical literature. And what that means is it's a slow boil. There's this constant warm process that helps break food down. And when we put things in our stomachs that are too cold, we not only feel it thermally, but we can feel it energetically as well. Good example is, if you think about the flip side, say cayenne pepper, you can put that in the freezer. It's cooler, but it's still energetically spicy and hot. This will stop. It always does. Hey guys, come on.
I feel like they're also energetically very revved up.
Seriously, and they don't eat according to the way. Anyway, so smoothies, salads, ice creams, things like that. Again, how we eat is important. The overindulgence, that bogs down our digestive system. So that's important. The reactive eating, again, not only this year, but especially around the holidays. If there's ever a time that people emotionally eat, it's between now and January. The way we eat and the foods that we eat, when it all comes down to it, it's about inflammation. Food can cause inflammation in our bodies. It can cause inflammation in our upper digestive system. And that can be like the gas and the bloating and the nausea and the indigestion. It can cause inflammation in our gut. We were talking about IBS. We can have heartburn, and it can lead to headaches, swelling. Some people experience different kinds of joint pain, fatigue, aches. So again, this gets back to a question of consciousness and recognizing that when you eat certain things, do you feel good after you eat? And for most people, we know what's going to turn us on and what's going to turn us off and cause that inflammation and those problems. So recognize the foods that are in your interests and keep it as healthy as you can. And if there's any kind of question about what that means, it's just avoiding the processed foods, avoiding the rich stuff, excessive amounts of dairy and sugars and so on, and portion control. This is not the season for portion control, but the more we can do it, the better we are.
Great. Thank you so much for all of this insight. Those are actually all of our questions, but thank you so much for sharing so much information with us. And if anyone has any other questions, you can definitely reach out, and we're happy to help.
Fantastic. Yeah, no, this was fun. I sort of apologize for the dogs, but they're part of how we do this. They're unavoidable. But yeah, have a great holiday season, everybody. And if you have any questions about any of this, definitely reach out to us, email us, and we're happy to guide you through some of this stuff. But I think we'll all do better in this coming season than we think we might.
Hopefully, yes. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening and happy holidays.
Thank you.